It can be difficult when you are facing financial difficulties, when you are facing challenges in your family and in your family relationships. It can be challenging when you are on your job and you are coming against all types of systems that are in concert to operate against you. It can be challenging when you are dealing with health crisis and you don't know, and the doctors may not have a clue, and you're still feeling the pain and the pressure of whatever you are dealing with. It can be challenging when you are in a relationship that is not working the way that you would have envisioned a relationship to work. And as a matter of fact, it seems as though it's working against you. It can be challenging in those moments to see that there is a higher calling, to see that somehow or another that this that I'm facing, that I am dealing with, that I am contending with, that I am not liking, that I am facing that does not feel good. It can be challenging for you to understand and to see how this is working for your good. It can be challenging to see how this works for the benefit of God's plan in this earth, and how just simply changing our lens so that we can see and recognize in the middle of those things that this is working for something in a moment that I cannot see. When we look back through the scriptures, there are so many different characters and people that we see do amazing, significant things that leave an impact on this earth, that leave an impact on humanity. Whether it's from Moses or Abraham or Elijah or Joseph or David or Jesus, the disciples, the woman at the well, each of these people, they introduced something into this earth realm that changed the perspective of how people operated, how they saw God, how they saw themselves, how they related to things on this earth, where it comes in respect to how things have been established in heaven, as below, so above. It can be challenging when you're in the face and in the middle of those circumstances for you to see that somehow or another, maybe not in this moment, it might not feel like it, but this is working to produce a greater result on the inside of me. When you are called to a higher purpose, when you are called to a higher ground, when you are called and you are given a mandate over your life, there will be circumstances and situations that are perfectly designed and aligned in order to move you towards whatever that purpose is that is going to change something in humanity. When we look as a community, the most marginalized communities that exist on this earth and on this planet, they yield and bring forth some of the greatest things that change and shape society as we know it. When we look back at Moses, for instance, we understand that Moses was born in a struggle. Moses was born where there was a decree that every male child would be killed, and his mother had to hide him. That was a struggle of hiding him. And then he was shipped off, and he was later picked up by the Pharaoh's daughter. We understand that entire story, how he was raised amongst the Egyptians, but yet he was really a Hebrew. So therein was a struggle with his identity. Not only was there a struggle with his identity, but we find this one moment where Moses is fighting back and forth with an Egyptian because they had done something to a Hebrew, and something rose inside of him, and the struggle between who he was and who he used to be and who he needed to become was all happening in one moment. We can see the struggle with Moses where he had a struggle and he really didn't believe that he could do what God was calling him to do. Much like many of us today, that we have some form of something that is holding us back, where we feel as though this is the one thing that I cannot let this be exposed. This is the one thing that I can't let anyone know about. And 9 times out of 10, this is the very reason why God has actually called you. We see this same struggle when Moses is dealing with the people and he brings back the Ten Commandments, and on his way back to bringing back the Ten Commandments, how they had all turned away from the things that he had shown them, that he had spoken to them, that God had revealed to them through him. And then there was a struggle. We see the struggle where he smites the rock, and we see all of these different struggles that he endured, and he was yet still the one that God had called to lead the children of Israel out of Egypt. We see this same struggle with Abraham. A matter of fact, the struggle was so ingrained, or such a part of Abraham's life, that God even got him to the place of going to the top of the mountain, and he had to struggle with having to sacrifice his own son. I can't imagine what that must have felt like as a father. Because as a father, I'm not sure that I would have been able to make those same movements. That was a struggle for him, for any mother, for any father. You know what your children mean. Even if you and your children are distant, it's the fact that they are yours. And to get to the place of having to sacrifice something that you have created, something that you love, something that your heart is given towards, that is a struggle. But in order for the name Jehovah Jireh to be released into the atmosphere and into this earth realm, he had to endure that struggle. We see the struggle with Joseph, as he was one that was sent into the palace through, by way of going into a pit by his brothers, because of the struggle of them just not liking him. Because many times when you are called to something great, people will find reasons not to like you. When you are called to something great, people will always find the errors in the things that you do and in the things that you say for absolutely no reason, because they have not been able to identify the call that God has given over your life. But Joseph had to go through a struggle in order to be positioned in a place during famine that he could defend and take care of the same people that were the ones that actually dismissed him and that sold him into slavery. And Joseph says something critical in the latter verses, where he says, hey, it was not you that did that, but God allowed that to happen, which would indicate to us that God does allow some things to occur in our life. And I know that if we want to look at it negatively, through a negative lens, then we could say, why would God have to allow that? But when you change your view and understand that struggle and perseverance, it builds character, it builds and develops our faith, and it builds and it helps us to understand what's on the inside of us. For those of us that do any type of strength training, you understand that it takes for something to tear in order for it to grow. We understand the concept of Jesus taking the bread and breaking it and then blessing the bread and then it being distributed. It could not be distributed unless it was actually broken. And the more times it was broken, the more times it was able to be distributed to those that were in need of it. We see the same struggle with David, where he was dismissed by his brothers and pushed aside by his brothers. He had to endure a struggle. We see this same struggle with Jesus. But then when we get into modern day history, we can identify this same struggle with people like Martin Luther King, with people like Malcolm X. And if we were to be even more modern with culture, we can see the same type of struggle with people like Bob Marley and people like Tupac Shakur. We can see this struggle with people, whether it is in biblical history or whether it is in our history. We can see that there is a struggle with people who have decided to defend and speak up for humanity, not for their own interests, but rather for humanity, that they can bring about change and recognition of just allowing people to see how their actions and their lack of actions is influencing and hurting other people. And I can guarantee you that when you are called to something great, there is going to be a struggle. And there's also going to be people that are not going to understand you and people that are going to try to devalue you. And a lot of times that is because they see something that is in you that they wish they had in themselves. And then some of the times because they have been trained to only look for certain things that would identify them as being great. When we look at Jesus, most people in this current society, they would not have recognized him as who he was. Not as the Savior, of course, because they would have recognized him as a foreigner. They would have recognized him as someone that did not operate by the system of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. They would have recognized him as someone that was not welcomed in their community. They would have recognized him as someone who was less than, that was not at the status quo financially with everyone else. And so they would have never given him current stage. They would have probably removed him from the existence of being and lessened his words, pointing out something negative on him and bad on him because he was here for humanity, not for his own interest. Friends, when you are called to a higher ground, when you are called to something that is greater, there will be moments that you will go through some form of struggle. And if you're in that place today where you are in a struggle, you are in a current fight, I know that it is hard for you to see how this current fight is ultimately working for the greater good. But as my grandmother used to always say, my big mom used to always say, if you don't have no fight, you're not right. We're going to go through things in order to develop this character and this person of who we were called to be. Philippians chapter 3, verse number 14. It gives us very clear instructions. It says, I press towards the goal to win the prize for which God has called me heavenward in Christ Jesus. I keep pressing. I never stop pressing. The message for today is God is calling you higher, but don't stop pressing forward. And in order to press, that means that something must be coming against you. In order for me to press, that means that there must be some form of friction. That if you don't have friction, then are you really pressing? If people are not disliking you, then are you really doing what you were called to do? Friends, no matter where you are today, I am pretty sure that you're in a place in your mind where if you're in the middle of the press, that sometimes it's hard for someone to reach you. Sometimes it's hard for someone to say something that can bring solace or peace into your heart or into your mind. Sometimes when you're in the middle of struggle, there is nothing that anyone can say because the burdens of where you are so heavy upon you. Sometimes that no matter whether it's a preacher, whether it's a person that writes a song, whether it's a person that writes lyrics, when you have left the presence of that, whatever it is that is being revealed in that moment, then you're back to face whatever it is. And many times you're back to face it alone. I can only tell you that when looking at Elijah and Elisha, when looking at the various people that were in the Bible, their struggles left them sometimes in places of feeling isolated. Their struggles sometimes left them in the face and in the place of feeling unheard, of feeling unseen. There were moments that they went through, much like I'm sure you are going through, where they were hated, they were not liked, and they were misunderstood. When we look at every modern day character, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Bob Marley, Tupac. While there are so many people who may have differences of thoughts about them because of whatever their stance was, they instructed and influenced change in a culture. They instructed and influenced change in a culture. And because of that, people hated them. Did they do all things right? Neither did the people in the Bible. Do you do all things right? Neither do the people in the Bible. We don't get it always right because we're human. But what we have to do is keep pressing. Friends, the message for you today is this: stop discounting yourself because other people have not identified your value. Your value is not contingent and consistent upon what you're facing today. What you're facing today can be an indicator of the greatness that's going to be revealed, because to whom much is given, much is required. These light afflictions are only but for a moment, and if we compare the afflictions that you're going through, and they are called light compared to the glory that shall be revealed, then the afflictions that you are going through are small compared to what is going to be revealed from them. You may indeed be going through a struggle. And I know that it is rough to sit in a place of a struggle. I've been in many struggles myself. I know that it is hard to pick your head up and keep telling yourself that you are whatever God says you are, when everything that you're looking at can be pointing back a mirror that is not so pleasant, that does not give you great joy to look at. I know that you may be looking at the mistakes that you have made. I know that you may be looking at who has co-signed or celebrating you or petting you on your back. David reminds us that sometimes we will not have someone to pat us on our back. Sometimes we will not have other people to remind us of how great we are. We will not have other people that will recognize. But David says, sometimes we must encourage ourselves in the Lord. Sometimes we have to remember the things that God has brought us through that helps us to see that God is with us. Sometimes we have to recognize those moments that God showed up for us, and we know that it could have been no one else besides him. Sometimes we have to rest back in the fact that we know in our hearts that we came to influence and change and impact humanity, not our personal interests, but we came for the greater good of all of the human race and of this earth itself. I'm going to ask you today to redirect your attention back from how bad this feels to you to how this could be possibly moving you towards changing and shaping something in this world. Keep pressing, friends. Keep pressing. Don't give up. You're making a difference, and someone needs you. You're not going through what you're going through for yourself solely. There is some little girl, there is some little boy, there is someone somewhere that needs to know that they can get through because you got through. Someone needs to know that they can become something because you fought until you became something. I'm hoping that this message encouraged you today. Don't stop pressing. I want to thank every single one of you for following me every single week. And over the last couple of days, I am so grateful for so many more of you that have joined this community. You're ready to share love. You're ready to spread goodness. You're ready to seek out the plans and the purpose that you have been placed on this earth, and you're ready to run after it. And I am proud of you, and I'm rooting for you, and I'm praying for you. You're going to be amazing, and I am so grateful for you. For those of you all that would love to continue to partner with me, I thank you so much every single week for sowing and for giving, for sharing your words of kindness with me. I certainly appreciate you, and I thank God for you. Thank you for watching. Until next time, keep pressing.